Welcome, everyone, to Women of the Military podcast. I'm really excited to have Lori here to talk about her story and her book that she wrote. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, I always like to start with why did you decide to join the military?
In my particular case, I don't have a really glowing patriotic story for you. I'm not sure if you read my book, but if you did, you see I needed to go find a life for myself. That's essentially why. Um, and I saw a commercial on TV, of truck drivers, and I was on Highway 101 in California. I said, "Yeah, I can go do that. How cool is that?" That's what I got to do.
Yeah. I'm like halfway done, I think, with your book. So I read I read the part about Yosemite, which I'm from California, so it was
Yeah.
really fun to read about
Oh,
that.
great.
And you're in Germany right now. Is
Yeah.
how far I've gotten. So
Okay.
But yeah, but I always start with that, and it's interesting because I feel like there's this pressure for some reason to be at this, like, patriotic reason, but I the benefits, the reasons that people come up with of why they join, it's usually because, they saw something, they thought it was a good idea, they need money for school,
Right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
no worries on it not being a patriotic story. That's more normal than,
Yeah.
abnormal.
Yeah. I agree with you on that one. People, they go, how did I get here? Kind of thing. So,
So you wanted to be a truck driver and you decided I'll join the army.
mhm.
What was that experience like? And it was 1978, is that right?
78. Yeah.
I'm
Well,
impressed that I knew that.
was a very well that yeah, I'm impressed. Yeah, that's very good. It was obviously a radically different world, than it is now. And of course, when I went in, is the title of the book, it says 2 Week WAC. It's talking about going in at a time that it was a women's Army Corps rather than the Army. I didn't have any concept of this at that time. I was just going to the Army because I want to drive a truck, and uh, and so 1978, for some reason, they decided to disband the WACs at that time. And so whoever was on deck at the time, and there was many of us, not just me. And so we all became the first like regular army. And as it's been a big social experiment that the military has had this thrust upon them time and time again as the melting pot of America and so on. And so all the people that were our leadership at that time were all ex-Vietnam um, folks, and they were not happy about us being there at all. So it was very, very different in those days, and we had all these different iterations of uniforms. And I look at the pictures now, and I just go, "Oh my gosh, what the heck were we wearing then?" So yeah,
Yeah.
1978 was different.
So you were in the WAC and then it disbanded and you went straight into the army. I mean, nothing really changed, I guess, except for on paper. Or would you say that there was a change in the attitudes, or what do you think about that?
There definitely was a change because when I was in basic training, by the way, here in Alabama, left San Francisco and came to Alabama for basic training. Um, in basic training, it was still the WACs. So we had all these drill sergeants, and it was all females in basic. And then when we went to AIT, that was when the disbandment had happened prior to that. So we got there, and there was a lot of grumbling and a lot of, well, we don't know what you're doing here, but blanket, come on. And they just kind of tolerated us. Um, and then there was a lot of really humorous things too. Like, for example, my squad leader had to go to a promotion board one time, and he comes back and he says to me, "Well, they asked me what your shoe size was." And I said, "Size 4." And I said, "What do you think I am, an elf?" Because promotion boards, you're supposed to know everything about your troopies, and all of that kind of thing. So it was humorous, actually. I thought I was an elf or something.
He was just like, "I didn't know what to say because it wasn't the same as me, so I just" yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So a big transition. And, did you enjoy being a truck driver? Did you find that to be interesting?
Oh, I loved it. It was so much fun. I couldn't possibly. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was a lot of fun. We were all on the road, and of course, it was unauthorized. But we slept on the side of the road, and we slept in parking lots, and we slept wherever. As because as I mentioned in there, they very seldom had how any sort of billeting for us. And whenever we arrived on with a convoy going somewhere, they said, "Oh, you brought females." So it was logistically difficult for them. And so a lot of the times we said, let's just go sleep in the truck.
Oh, you brought females.
Yeah,
Why'd you
you
have to
brought
make it different?
females. Oh, brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did make mention of it in there. I said it felt to me it was a rather livestock sort of sentiment. You know what I mean? So
When I was deployed, we all would just stay in the same tent by the end of the deployment when we would go to Bagram for missions. And
yeah,
so they had temporary stuff, and if they could get one tent just for our team, we would all just stay in the same place and
yeah,
obviously, go to the bathroom, change and all that stuff. But it it was against regulations, but it made a lot more sense because being in the women's tent, everyone was getting up at different times and everyone was on a different mission, and so it was
right.
just you slept better, you
Yeah,
knew you were safe because you were with the guys that you were with all the time. So
yeah.
I understand the not following regulations.
Well, they
It
like
just
a lot of times we'd be someplace and they'd say, "Well, we'll sleep out here in the truck, just so I wouldn't have to be out there by myself."
right.
So, and when I was by myself, I mean, because it's a big rig, it's a big truck. I had a lug wrench that was like this big scepter, and I held on because I could have cracked open somebody's skull like a watermelon with that baby. So
Yeah.
occasionally, I did have to sleep by myself in a parking lot or on the side of the Autobahn or whatever. So
Yeah. And you just mentioned Audubon, and I said that you're in Germany, where I'm reading right now. So, after you finished training, is that when you went to Germany? Am I remembering correctly?
yeah, so basic training, AIT, and then went to Germany and basically learned how to drive a stick shift in the big rig. So I had push button automatic, my grandmother's car for driver's training back in California. So when we had these trucks, not only did you have to learn how to do a stick shift, but you have to double clutch. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You have to double clutch so that you don't lose RPMs going up a hill with a load. So we're going like that, and it was very cool. So when I got in a vehicle for the first time, a regular POV, and I was a 3-speed on a column Peugeot, and I was like double clutching and jamming the gears and everything. He goes, "Hey, take it easy." I said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Isn't this how you drive?
This is how you drive." Yeah.
That's funny.
So
No, I drove stick shift in college, and then when I went to my lieutenant training, we all had to drive all these vehicles. I don't really know why. And I was one of the few people who knew how to drive shift, and even though I hadn't done it in a long time, I knew how to do it. And so it was funny watching all the people like, try and get out of first gear.
oh
So,
yeah, it's pitiful. And
yeah.
you should see people trying to back up trailers. Boy, that was pitiful. And people
Oh
stand
yeah,
there
we had to
tapping
do
their
that
foot
too.
and rolling their eyes and laughing at you. And it's really it's a badge of honor if you can get in there and put that baby in there first time. So I got to
Yeah.
be pretty good at that.
Yeah, we did that too, and there was a guy in the car with me, I don't know why, and he's like, "Turn left, turn right, turn left," and that was the only way that I did it. I don't have any pride of doing it because he was like, "Okay, now turn, now do," and he knew how to get me in the right spot. But it was funny because I was like, "I would never have made it if you weren't here," so
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
really.
So
Yeah, those are fun memories. But yeah, to have that as a job. And you also got to drive around Germany and see different things instead of just being like at one location, right?
yeah, and that was really a big part of it. I mean, now we didn't drive outside of Germany like the other truck drivers that were in a different group from us. They went to, all the other non-communist countries there, but we were just in Germany. We're primarily tactical, so we didn't do any of the trips where you get to stay in a hotel or any of that kind of stuff. We were armor personnel carriers, retrograde vehicles, ammunition, that kind of thing is primarily what we were hauling around. So I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, it was a great adventure, and I really enjoyed it.
And what was it like to be in Germany during the Cold War era? I mean, because if you enlisted in 78, then the wall would not be over if you went straight
No,
there, right?
it's fascinating because like even in my book, I'm talking about the whole reason that we were in Germany at that time was to keep Russia out of Europe. And so here I am in, 2023, and I imagine my astonishment when I saw these tanks rolling into Ukraine, because that was what was they've always been at it. It was just a matter of when. But it's astonishing to see that happen for real when we were expecting to be cannon fodder until reinforcements arrived. Return of forces to Germany, Reforger, was their exercise of epic proportion every year. Cost millions and millions and millions of dollars, so they stopped doing it. But we were constantly being told that we were targets for espionage, honey traps and all that. Like the guys were constantly being told, hey, if Ivanka meets you in the bar and starts, chatting you up, don't think that you're really handsome. So they were telling us that kind of stuff all the time. Be aware of espionage. Because the Russians were always looking for troop movements, troop numbers, its strength numbers, what battle plans, anything like that. They were always looking out for that sort of thing. So, but yeah, it was supposedly we had alerts in the middle of the night just to say, okay, Russia's coming right now, kind of thing. And they would turn on the sirens and everybody would run and go put their stuff out, and we'd deploy, like everybody in the country would deploy at the same time. It was really, really something to see that many tanks and trucks and planes and just thousands of them. It was really something to see that.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was stressful in a way that I don't think a lot of people think about. Like, you guys didn't know what was coming, and you were being told, like, be ready, be prepared for, Russia to invade. So that, I mean, that's a lot of stress to being in Germany instead of like today, where you're like in Germany and traveling and exploring, and,
Yeah.
it's relatively safe instead of, yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think I've interviewed
Well,
anyone who's talked
well,
about that.
on the other hand, Germany is a much safer, well, even then, was a much safer place to be than America, where I grew up. There's no motorcycle gangs there. There's no, I'm sure there are drugs and drug lords and all that, but you didn't see that. I mean, the Polizei were in charge. So when I mentioned, sleeping on the side of the road and all that, I I would never do that in America. I'd be terrified. you know? So yes, it was scary from the standpoint of, that there could be tanks here tomorrow, but by the same token, it was also the country itself was very, very safe. So
Yeah.
I felt very safe there. Um, Now, as far as being in a unit where it's obviously almost all guys, I felt, I was always very aware being aware of how you're dressed, how you're, you don't want to go out and go get in a bad situation, in other words. So, so I was very acutely aware of that. But unlike a lot of people, a lot of women that go in the military, I did not go in from a standpoint of, oh, I'm an innocent little lamb and I'm going into this. I was very, very jaded, before I went in. So that really protected me a lot because I kind of had such a heightened intuition that I like to say I could smell the grass growing behind me at night. So for that aspect, that also added to my safety posture. And I can say no horrible, horrendous things ever happened to me. And I
Yeah.
think it's because of situational awareness and having, I compare my neighborhood to a Cheech and Chong movie. If that are you familiar with Cheech and Chong movies? Okay, so there's a that's in the 70s. These guys who they smoke weed all the time, and the whole culture is all about drugs, and it's funny. It's very, very funny. But I mean, you should Google it sometime. Cheech and Chong, you'll go, oh my god. So that's where I grew up, and my parents smoked weed. My mom smoked weed with her friends. My dad smoked weed with his friends. So I was definitely not in there like, oh, I'm just a cute like young little innocent thing. I was, oh, no, 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 no. I was like, I'll kill you. I will kill you. you know
Well, and you had been on your own for a little bit before you joined the military, so that
yeah.
also, you know. Yeah, I think one of the chapters that I recently read, you were like, and I just went to bed because I wasn't going so and so where by myself. I only go to these place,
Yeah.
in a group. And
Right.
I mean, that's smart.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to just stay in your room and get some extra sleep or read a book instead of going somewhere where it might be more fun, but there's also the danger aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even that, I don't know, you probably didn't get to the part yet, but this guy that I married over there was like wanting me to play spin the bottle with his friends. And I said in there, I said, I'm being pimped and I'm 19 and I'm really not happy about it. You know, so that lots of just uncomfortable stuff. Um, Unfortunately, I married this guy and he liked how I looked, but he wasn't interested in me having this annoying personality. I said, too bad I'm not a blow up doll, you know. But the irony is, if you kind of go from the beginning, is that the irony of the whole thing is that I was a really insecure person looking for security. How do you find security? By going and living in a tent, and then finding security by going to Germany and driving trucks. But ultimately, I was looking for a job, a roof, a home, a family. That's why I got married, because I was wanting to establish all that stuff. What a disaster that was. It was awful. Just terrible. Oh, goodness gracious. Thank God I got rid of him.
Well, and you're young overseas, and I think it's really hard in the military. You have so much freedom and so much responsibility, and then you make choices, and then you find out maybe this wasn't the best choice. Um, and you
Well,
can't. I mean, and you can't really figure it out until you live it. Unfortunately.
and that's a really good point right there. And that's one of the similar things that we all have as having been service members, is that you go and you try stuff and you go, oh, that didn't work. Or you try something, you go, wow, I didn't know that I could do that. And so it really opens up all kinds of things that I think just make you a more well-rounded person,
Yeah.
and then you meet people from all these different places. And, you get to know, I mean, how many stories are there of people in basic training from all these different places? And they make friends and they develop as a team and all that. And that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff that we all have in common.
Yeah. Yeah, so how long did you stay in Germany before coming back to the States? Or did
I
you
was there
come
for
back?
3 years. I turned 21 the day President Reagan was inaugurated, and they let the Iran hostages go. Jimmy Carter had been the president previous to that, and they knew there was a new sheriff in town. They did that. So then after that, towards the end of the book, I reenlist for air traffic control. So, and I didn't even know what air traffic control was, but I said, hey, that sounds like a good job. And I didn't want to be stuck married to this guy. So I said, let me just, go re up. So I went to air traffic control school in Fort Rucker, Alabama. That's where I met my current husband. And then, we deployed all over the place, setting up and running division airfields for different, um, pretty much every time you deploy someplace, an airfield is kind of logistical hub, and so we went in ahead and, made sure the landing surface was ready and got all the communication equipment up and established obstacle clearance and all that sort of stuff. And so that's what we did. I did that for the remainder of my 17 years until I retired 26 years ago, April.
Wow.
And I
That
had a
sounds
lot
like
of really cool jobs in aviation. Wow. I mean, wow.
yeah, I mean, that sounds so cool, and I'm Air Force, so I know how important runways are. They're
Hmm.
they're kind of really important to us,
Yeah, they are.
and as a civil engineer, I know all about setting up base too, so I know what you're talking about, and so it's cool to hear, the Army side and how they do it, and just I don't and how much it overlaps, so it's kinda interesting.
Yeah, and the Air Force has combat controllers, and like for example, when we went to Honduras in 1983, the Air Force combat controllers they were up there in the tower, the Honduran tower, and we got there and they said, "Where have you been? We want to go to the hotel and get some room service." So we were staying down there in lean-tos, getting eaten by mosquitoes, and they're going to the hotel.
That
They
sounds
said,
like the Air Force.
"Have fun." They said, "I don't know why you Army people live the." Oh gosh, I had to go when we were there. I hitchhiked to Panama to go buy beer or something, buy whatever for the people. Plane broke down in Panama, so I had to go. I had the clothes on my back. I went and stayed at the Air Force barracks. They let me stay in their day room on the couch. I got to take a shower and everything. And the Air Force girls will come out and they sit there and they look at me. They go, "How can you stand it?" And they're sitting wearing like little earrings and stuff. Of course, that was unauthorized in BDU, in regular uniform. But and I mean, and they said that to me, and I was just like, "You mean everybody doesn't live like this?" I thought everybody lived like this. Every now and then you realize, no, everybody doesn't live like this.
No. Yeah, I deployed with the Army, and I was like, "I don't wanna be in the Army." I joined the Air Force.
Yeah.
And when
We,
we got to go at the very end, they were releasing us back to the Air Force, and so we were like, "We're in the Air Force. Let us in the Air Force building. We don't wanna be in the Army anymore.
yeah,
We're done with that."
the Air Force people got paid like hazard pay or something when they had to work because we often took your weather observers with us. So they'd be attached to us and they were like, they got paid extra and they were like, sucks real bad to have to work for the Army, but they were good guys. I mean, they worked with us. They were great.
Yeah.
I don't have anything bad to say about them at all. They were great.
Yeah, it's cool to hear, like, all the different places you got to go, and I think sometimes people think that the military, when you're at peace, doesn't really do anything, but they're still all over doing so much and all kinds of missions going on.
Yeah, they do lots of things. As a matter of fact, if you're on a military base, and certainly an Army base, the local community uses labor for many different things. And we have to put on all sorts of entertainment for people, like parades and, AUSA meetings, all those kinds of things to keep in with the local um, communities, the mayors, and all that. That is kind of a big deal. But another thing, when we were in Germany the first time, we weren't on vacation. We weren't there on vacation. We were driving missions all the time. And then later, when we were in aviation, if like here's our little company of controllers, and we've got radar, and we got tower, and we've got navigation beacons and all that kind of stuff, vehicles and stuff. And we would have to deploy ourselves instead of getting a transportation company to take us. So we had to be deployable ourselves. But we did have to jump on your airplanes. We'd have to go load up into cargo airplanes. And you know how they put the stuff on the floor and then they move it all around for weight and balance for the aircraft and all that. So, no, I'd be in a 5-ton truck up on a way up high in some, gosh, what do you even call that? Like a scaffolding type thing. Can't see anything around me at all. I have to back into the belly of a plane so we can deploy. That kind of thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a lot of stories, which is probably why you wrote a book. So let's transition and talk a little bit about why you decided to write your story in 2 Week WAC.
Well, I was there, and I remember the day that I decided that it was going to be a good story was in 1979, and I was ironing a uniform on a bunk, and I caught the bed on fire, and everybody was and the fire marshal comes. He happened to be in the building at that time, comes rushing down there with the fire extinguisher, puts it out, and everybody's patting each other on the back, and they're not lighting cigars, but you get the drift, right? That day I said, this would make a great movie. I mean, this is just like the irony is so much more than MASH. I used to watch the TV show MASH, and I said, there's no way they can have that much humor and irony. Oh, but they do, and so much more. So, I knew that I felt like my story wasn't just any old average story. I mean, going from a tent, living in a tent before going in the Army, how many people do that? Thought it was just an interesting story. I thought it was an interesting story. And my outlook on things, I in my story, basically, I'm observing people saying and doing things. And quite often I give other people the benefit of the doubt. I did that all the time, even though I'm listening to them and I'm going, quite often thinking people are really, God, this person's incredibly full of shit. But you give them the benefit of the doubt. There's a lot of things that are politically incorrect that I observed, and I'm just going to talk about it. I'm not going to, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, I make observations about pregnant women in the Army, and I'm sure some people read it and go, how can you say that? That's terrible. But you read the beginning of the book. You saw that I had a real bad, my goal in life was to avoid pregnancy. And that's just where I came from. So when I saw, I would go down to do some work on my 201 file, go down into the basement, and there's a semicircle of young ladies in there, Army ladies, and they're all pregnant, like 6 or 7 of them. And they're regaled to the basement. That was 1978, 79. Out of sight, out of mind. You know what I mean? So That's something that people don't talk about. And I said, hey, this is how it was then, you know. um, and then I make comments about gay people because back then, okay, first of all, I'm from San Francisco Bay Area, so I don't care which way you do anything. I honestly, I really don't. But a lot of times, some of the people there had this like a militant attitude. You have to embrace my sexuality and all. I don't have to embrace a damn thing. Leave me alone. So those are some of the realities of things that I talk about. I also talk about how in the host country, quite frequently, um, the guys would marry a local girl, and I called it they're looking for a trip to the big PX, and that's not a very flattering thing to say, but you know it's true. I mean, and sometimes it didn't even matter my observation. It's just my opinion. It was just like, okay, I'm gonna pick an American and I'm gonna marry one of them. Why? Well, because American guys are generally speaking more modern towards women. And a lot of the guys, like the German guys, treat the ladies that they work with like sex objects, and they're disrespectful to them, and all of that. And they don't make a lot of effort in their physical appearance either, because why should I? You know, so it's things like that. I mean, those are the observations that I was making around there, you know, about things. And then there was drug use, and there was a lot of things like that. And I feel like I wanted to talk about things as they really happened rather than today's society has gotten to the extreme of political correctness. Now, I get it that we need to be diverse, respectful, and all that. But when it gets to the point where you can't even have an opinion anymore, you know, I have an issue with that. And so that's why I wanted to just say, this is what I saw. This is what happened. This is my, you know, observations about it. And other people, okay, oh, I can't believe you said that. Well, that's what I saw. That's exactly what I saw. I'm telling you exactly what I saw. So that was kind of my angle on that. And plus, I thought it was very entertaining, you know. And if I could have got it made into a movie, would have a great soundtrack. Actually, I am working with somebody right now to make it into a screenplay.
That's
So
awesome.
something may happen with it, something may never happen with it. But I mean, even if they change my story around and everything like that, nobody can take my book away from me. I'll always have that. So, you know, I'm okay with whatever they're going to do to, you know, to modify the story to make it a saleable package or what have you. So,
That's really cool. Yeah. So if people want to check out your book, where is the best place for them to go to get a copy?
it's called 2 Week WAC. It's published by Balboa Press, and the author is Bea Ann Amark. I can show it to you here. I don't know if you could see that. That's, you can see it a little bit. Yeah, that's inside the cab of my truck. I took that picture at a left-hand turn lane in Ludwigsburg, Germany. And if you turn all the way, there's a castle right on that corner. So it's very cool. Anyway, it's on Amazon, Balboa Press, Barnes and Noble, um, and so it's 2 Week WAC by Bea Ann Amark on those locations. And there is a audio book, and then there's a hardcover, and then there's a, you know, a paperback as well.
Awesome. We'll put links to that so that people can find it easily in the show notes. And I always like to end the interview with, what advice would you give to a young woman who's considering joining the military? So what would you say?
Well, first of all, I will tell you, I do encourage young people both men and women to go in the military because I think it's a good thing. I think it you know it helps to establish patriotism if nothing else, and it also gives you a good getting up on your feet and seeing the world, and as I mentioned earlier, seeing, oh my God, I know I don't want to do this, and hey, I didn't know I could do this. You'll never find those things out, unless you go into the pressure cooker that is a military experience, I guess I would say.
Yeah, the military certainly shows you that you can do more than you ever expected and pushes you in ways that you never either wanted to go, but then you find
Yeah,
out, "Oh, I could do more than I thought." So, I agree with
definitely.
that. Yeah. Thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for writing your book so that other people could hear your story. I'm really glad we got to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate you.